Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Today, the lecture that we will have is basically going to be focused on a concept called segmentation. But before we proceed on to that, we would like to recapitulate a little bit of what we did in the last session. Plus, there was a particular aspect of research that we had suggested at that point of time that I will cover it during this period. Why? Because there is a strong association between segmentation and customer satisfaction. For that kind of research that we were talking about in terms of quantitative research and qualitative research, and we had considered a number of scale items, we had also desired to look at the concept of customer satisfaction, which was very critical when I started my lectures. Now, there are methods of evaluating customer satisfaction, and one of the major aspects of customer satisfaction that we need to recognize is one, and that is it is the gap between expectation from the customer and what you provide the customer. If what the customer wants in terms of expectations is the same that the customer is getting, then he will be totally satisfied. On the other hand, if the customer expects something different but gets lesser than what he is expecting, then we will find that he will be dissatisfied. Now, therefore, customer satisfaction becomes a function of these two things. One, the customer expectation, and what is the delivered value to the customer. Now, the important point is, therefore, how to understand whether customer has been satisfied or not satisfied. In various research methodologies that we had discussed, we had suggested that surveys are normally carried out through properly formulated questionnaires. You could either go to the mall to ask people directly, you could send it through the mail, telephone survey, in-depth interviews, and so on and so forth, but based on properly delineated questionnaires. One more aspect that is required in terms of how can you understand customer satisfaction framework is to start a complaint center, or you can ask for a small box where people can put their complaints in, their comments, and that kind of a method would give you a proper insight into what the customers actually are facing while they are receiving the product or the services. The comment cards are normally what we have. However, one individual frame that companies normally try and employ, particularly in the services area, to check out whether their retail service people or the people who are delivering services are doing a proper job. Because remember what we have said, customer expectation is one aspect. However, what is being delivered is the second part of it. Now, the issue is really in this sense that first of all, the company has to know what does the customer expect. So a problem can occur between the company's assessment of what the customers really want. So that is one aspect that we have been talking about, and we have said that we should be able to, through proper research, find out what does the customer really need. And the methods have been discussed about it. The second part of this whole package is what is to be delivered to the customer. Now, in this second part of it, we have, like I said, different methods. Again, we can carry out survey, and we can find out whether the customers are satisfied with the services provided or not. However, there is one method that normally companies do employ, and that is called ghost shopping, which means one of the members of the company himself or herself visits the point where the service is being delivered. This is like they will act as the customer themselves. I mean, they will act as a customer. So wo us dukaan mein ya us service center mein they will go and pose as a customer and see how the customer service is being delivered and make an assessment of what is happening. This will give a very clear picture as to what kind of a typical service the customer is receiving. Now, having said this, we have more or less covered all the aspects of the customer research area. Now we are going to move towards the concept of segmentation. Let's first figure out what we started off from the very beginning. And we said that customers are all different in the way they behave, in the way they think, in the way they perceive aspects of the nature or the environment around them. And because of this problem of diversity, we have an issue. Now, some people would say that this much of diversity would create a problem because obviously every individual will have different needs, have different frameworks, have different desires, and so on and so forth. But we should also recognize that there is an opportunity here. Why? Because if all the people had similar kind of needs and similar kind of wants and similar kind of desires, then what would have happened is that no marketer could have been able to differentiate the product that he is trying to offer. And all would be left is that there will be one single product, one single promotional campaign, one single price to try and satisfy everybody with that one single need. So there is an opportunity in segmentation. The opportunity is that the marketer needs to now find from all this group of customers that particular subset which would have more or less similar needs, which will be different from some other needs. The groups which can be found with similar needs, similar homogeneous needs, would be more easy to be able to be targeted for satisfaction than if everybody had only one single need and all the companies put together were trying to satisfy that one single need. So the opportunity then comes into this position is like this, that every company will try and segment the market and trying to find a group of people or a subset of that customer base which or who they can satisfy the best. And that is what we talked about when we discussed the theory of competitive advantage. Now, before we proceed anymore, let's recapitulate a few basic concepts which we have talked about just now, which includes the needs and the wants and the desires area. Now, try and recognize this, that most of the books and authors or practitioners normally tend to use the concept of the need and the want in the same breath. That means they use these words synonymously, which means उनके लिए ये word जो है need and want ये तकरीबन एक ही मायना रखता है. But remember that need is something which exists, pre-exists in our system. We already have a need. But when we want to satisfy that particular need, then we have a want. We may want something which may be different for various aspects. Let's say we are hungry. I am hunger. I have got hunger. This is my need, which is a generic need. But I may want to satisfy this need by using a hamburger, eating salad, going to KFC, or going to buy chapli kebabs or any other food item. This is what we are talking about. Therefore, when we say the customer has needs, yes, needs are all similar. However, what they differ on is the wants that they want to be satisfied. And it is this point that we are discussing today in terms of segmenting. And segmenting, therefore, requires that we do not treat the whole market as an aggregate. Now, if we treat the whole market as an aggregate, then what we have is what we have always studied in our previous courses is called mass marketing concept. In mass marketing, there is definitely benefit in that, and there is no question about it, that mass marketing always has lesser cost in implementation. Why? Because you have one single product, you might try and target a whole group of people through the same promotional campaign and hope for the best. This is also what we call the shotgun approach. But try and think about, let's say, an example of a refrigerator. If there was only one size of refrigerator, then a person who is living alone or a couple with no child, or an old family with no children at home, old people, or a family of 7 in the same house would be required to buy the same size of refrigerator. That means everybody would have to be seemingly कि किसी ना किसी तरह से गुजारा किया जाए. Now, that गुजारा करना is more difficult or more different than the concept of satisfaction with which we started today the lecture. Now, to bring satisfaction, I said to you that the expectation has to be very closely matched by what we deliver. In other words, a family of 6 children would require a different size of refrigerator than a couple who has only 2 people to use that. Same is the case with every other aspect that we find, and that is why if you recognize, you go to the market, you will find shampoo bottles which has sachets, very small, one individual use, medium-sized bottles, family-sized bottles. And the reason is that they are targeted to different types of segments of the market. And we will be discussing the way we segment the market and the basis of the segmentation of the market. But now let's come to the proper definition of segmentation. Segmentation is the process of dividing the total heterogeneous market into groups which are similar in their wants, what we also say homogeneous groups. These homogeneous groups are homogeneous within the group itself, but they are very different from the group outside, which means एक market है, let's say 100 आदमियों की, and out of that 20 people are more similar to each other in their wants from another 20 people within the same 100 market. So the logic therefore is that if the competitors like the companies or the marketers can discover one segment with a specific want, then they can really focus on that segment, discover the expectations of that particular segment, and then provide the services or the product that they believe that the customer wants in that particular segment. Now, recall again what I said to you a few sessions back, and that was that in marketing strategy, we have a perspective, the perspective we call the STP perspective. Now, what does STP stand for? We've already discussed it. It means segmentation, targeting, and then positioning. Now, we are talking about the first aspect of segmentation, and that is unless and unless we can break the market down into such groups which we can then satisfy to our most maximum abilities, only then we can provide some product based on a package of marketing mix, which is the kind of product it would be, the kind of price it would have, the promotion that will take it to the consumers, and the place where it will be delivered. Now, this package will be unique for the purposes of that particular segment. And that is the reason that diversity and segmentation are complementary. Like we were talking about diversity of the consumers and the approach of marketing to segment the market, these two are complementary. For example, if there is no diversity, then we will not have any segmentation done. And the marketers therefore recognize the fact that each customer is unique, but trying to satisfy each customer singly becomes totally costly, and which is the opposite extreme of what we call the mass marketing. On the other side, the idea is to be able to locate that group, which is substantial in size and can be approached or satisfied in a very profitable manner. That is the concept that we are going to now discuss in terms of what are the bases of segmentation. Now, there are a number of bases of segmentation. For example, the segmentation bases are in the normal conditions around about 9. The first one, for example, if you look at the screen, you will see them one by one, and then we will discuss these individually. Okay. The first one, for example, is geographical segmentation, which includes the region, the city, the urban areas, the rural areas, and so on and so forth. The second group of segmentation base is demographics, which means the age, the sex, the marital status, and so on and so forth of the customers. The third that we normally tend to use is basically psychographics, which means factors which influence lifestyles and various other aspects of it. Then we will find that there are certain aspects called the psychological factors. These psychological factors, for example, include motivation, behavioral factors such as the perceptions of the people that they have. Then we have what we call the social cultural segmentation, in which we look at the social framework in which a person lives, the status he has, and so on and so forth. Then we have what we call user-related segment. That means what is the framework under which the product will be used. Then we have what we call the usage situation, in which we look at the format in which the condition where we are going to be using this, like what we say is whether it's on a birthday, on a marriage, or so on and so forth. Then we have the segmentation frame we call benefit segmentation, which includes how we benefit from a particular product. And then finally, we have the hybrid. Now, hybrid is when you combine a number of them and get a better picture of the customer. So we can combine, for example, demographics with psychographics, or with usage-related situations, or maybe use-related situation. Therefore, hybrids is what we normally suggest that marketers should go and do. Why? Because they will get a better profile of the customer, the person whom he wants to satisfy. After having talked about the consumer-related segmentation, we should also recognize that industrial segmentation also takes place, which means business to business. You would know that generators are produced for, let's say, commercial use, but there are different sizes of generators that we have. The reason why it is so, because different organizations of different sizes will obviously have different capacity requirements for a generator. Same is the case of location of these industries. Industries which are located, let's say, in the north may have a different requirement in terms of inventory control or inventory management, or those which are located close to the seashore or the seaports, where the supply chain requirement is in a different format. Now, keeping these things in mind, we should recognize that segmentation, therefore, is a very strong strategic tool available for the marketer to be able to develop very cogent strategies in terms of trying to satisfy the expectations of the customers. Now we start from the very beginning each aspect of our segmentation base, and for the first we look at the geographical segmentation. Now, the underlying concept under the geographical segmentation is this: one, it is assumed, or research has also suggested the same or confirmed the same, that different regions have different needs. The South Desert area, like in the Sindh area, would have people who would require things in a different form than if we go to the northern areas where the temperatures are very cold. So based only on this geographical difference between temperatures, we can assume that there will be very different needs between the two. A very simple example is that in Karachi, you will very seldom find woolen clothes worn except for maybe 1 month in a whole year. Why? Because the temperatures are very temperate there. But on the other side, if you go towards the north, then a larger time frame of a year is when we wear woolen clothes. So naturally, there is a diversity, and we can find that this diversity will be able to help us develop products which are specifically aimed for a particular environment. It's also very simple. This is not only true for a nation's framework or a national context, but it's also true for international contexts. In the international context, for example, we know that people who live in America might require different kinds of technology and different kinds of products than people who live, let's say, in Nepal. Again, the idea is that there is definitely a little bit of a difference that will or can be targeted by the marketer. However, you should also see the other aspect, and that is that there is suggestion that over the regions, internationally as well as locally, a number of these diversifying needs have now started converging because of what we discussed earlier, the high level of communication that we have, the media that we are now viewing. We see different things on television, on computers, and that helps us converge towards the same framework. But like I told you, we need to recognize that there is always a possibility to find a particular segment or a particular group of people based on geographical frameworks. Having discussed this, let's go into the number 2 base, which is what we suggest is the most simple form of segmentation, that is demographics. Now, what is demographics? It's basically the characteristics of people. So we are looking at people on the basis of age, sex, marital status, education, income, and so on and so forth. Now, it is very true that we can segment the market on the basis of, let's say, age group. So the age group, for example, 14 years to 18 years cannot really tell us what the group need is unless we combine it with some other basis of segmentation which we have already discussed. For example, psychographic, for example, their attitude, for example, their lifestyles. Now, that is why it is suggested that using demographics is much better if you are going to describe the segment that has already been determined using some other base. Let's say we look at people who are very courageous, who are risk takers, and so on and so forth. And then if we want to describe this segment, those people who are courageous and who are risk takers in terms of investment, for example, then we should be able to say what kind of age group they have, whether they are married, how many children they have, what kind of income group they have, what kind of educational levels they have. Now, this definition or this description of that segment, which we talked about in terms of risk, will become much clearer. However, there is a number of researches which have been carried out on the basis of demographics, and demographics has been, in combination with other frames, been able to define the segment in a very proper manner. At this point of time, we will look at various factors and see how does these various factors influence the segmentation concept. Let's take the idea about age. Now, one thing more that you need to remember is that segmentation not only helps us fill the gap, the product gap, which, for example, we know that a product is not available for a particular segment and therefore we can develop it. Take an example of aspirin. Now, at a point of time, aspirin, can be used for pain killing. Pain killing could be very severe, so you obviously cannot use a very mild kind of a pain killer tablet, which does not give effect to the very severe kind of pain. So we find pain killers which are very strong. Then there are also people who have pain, cannot sleep at night. So what we find is that they have developed a painkiller which also helps in sleeping. So one factor of segmentation is to be able to develop new products. But segmentation also helps us look at trends that will be coming out into the future. Now, we know that, let's say in Pakistan, we have a very young population. 60% people are below the age of 25. Now, 60 to 70% people below the age of 25 is totally different from that group of people who are approaching between 60 and 70. Their needs will be different. We are not going to target the needs, but we can suggest and assume that the people who are ranging between 60 to 70 would have definitely different needs than people who are ranging up to 25. For example, the age group 60 to 70 most probably would require more medical facilities, whereas the young people would require more clothes, more eating out, more adventurous, more entertainment things that would be their targeted area. Now, age does give this differentiating framework, and we should be able to look at the future and try to see what the trends will be as the population ages or population becomes young. This is very typically what is happening internationally. For example, the Japanese population is aging very rapidly. And on the other hand, because of their population growth, there is, or let's say the birth rate is low. Therefore, they do not have now people to be able to handle their work. So logic says that they will have to import younger population to be able to do the work that their older generation cannot do. It's the same thing all over. And in the same frame, for example, the age group between up to 25, most of the time they are more targeted towards education. Now, that means schools must be there, colleges and universities must grow to compensate for that. But on the other side, if you look at the 60 to 70 age group who are retiring, those people would like to travel more because they are now retired, they have more comfortable time with themselves, and they would like to visit places that they could not do when they were young. This aspect is also very critical because researches have been done which suggests that the retired people are more comfortable in their lives. Why? Because they have now accumulated enough money to be able to stand. But this is very true about the foreign countries. Since these kind of studies are not so prominent in Pakistan, so therefore we really do not know what kind of requirements would be there as the population changes in terms of age. Now let's go to the next one, and that is the educational side of it. Again, we need to understand that based on education, the technology has a very strong relationship. Educated class would be easy to handle new technology, whereas people who are not as well educated may have difficulty in choosing the same technology. So therefore, in a country, we will find that there will be different levels of technology requirements. We see this normally in mobile phones. We see these in new television that we have, the remote controls that we have, the computer laptops we have. All these have to be planned and arranged in such a way that they take into consideration the requirements of that particular segment in terms of education. You cannot expect a very highly technical computer to be used by a person who really is not that well versed. Now, therefore, education also has a very singular impact on the person's needs and wants and the kind of things that he will require. From education, we can go to income. Now, obviously, income has a direct relationship with the price of the product and how rapidly the product would be bought. Now, there are certain products which are of low value, but we need to recognize that for a low-income person, that low-value product could be a very significant size of his income. Therefore, the same product for two income groups may have two different frameworks. Let's take an example. A Suzuki car, for example, or even a motorcycle, for a very low-income person may be a product that he has to save for a long period of time to buy. On the other side, in an organization, you might find that there are 50 motorcycles which are being handed over to the managers. Or you can see that very rich people might have a Suzuki car, which is used for the purposes of the servants going to the market to buy products or buy groceries. So the price of the product is obviously very directly linked up with the kind of income that the population or the targeted segment has. Not only the price, but also the product. For example, if you add a number of features to the product, the price has to go up. If the price goes up, obviously it will go out of the range of the buyer at the low income segment. And that is why we find that there are a number of products which has different kind of configurations. That means there is a base standard product which does not have attributes, frills attached to it. Typically we can see this in the cars. For example, there is a base model car, and then we find that the car has additional air conditioning. Then we find that the car would have a player, for example, the music playing system. And then we have steering controls, then what do you call remote controlled windows going up and down, and so on and so forth. The reason is that as the standard product is given more attributes, then obviously the segment has to shift from the low income towards the higher income, or for people who specifically need these kind of things. Just here to give you an example, look at the watches. Now, according to research, watches are normally, the people who make watches are normally segmenting the market on 4 typical bases. Number one is the sex. You can find that there are watches which are targeted towards the men. Then there are watches which are specifically for female. Now we find unisex watches, or which both can use. Then we find that the watches are segmented on the basis of function or use, the kind of use it will be put to. For example, if you are diving into the sea, you cannot take a normal watch, but there is something called a dress watch or a jewel watch, which you might wear as a fashion statement. Then we have prices as the basis of segmenting the market. The prices can range from anything from 500 rupees to maybe 2 lakhs or 3 lakh rupees, and much more than that too. So therefore, these 3, like I said, the segments are there. And then therefore, the final one is also the age group. For example, you have watches for older people, you have watches for youngsters, even children have watches now. So people tend to segment their markets in terms of all these frameworks to be able to get the correct product targeted at the correct customer. We were discussing, like just a few minutes back, we were discussing the concept of income as part of the segmentation procedure. Now, demographics, more or less, you can find out that there are various other factors, maybe the heights. Typically now we are finding that there are products which are targeted for different height people, different people of different weights and sizes, in the sense that we find that there is a small size of a shirt, then there is a medium size, then is a large size, then extra large, and then triple extra large, and so on and so forth. Okay, now having done this, let's move into the third aspect of, and I'll take up socio-cultural frameworks. Now, basically what we are talking about in social cultural framework is typically 2 major aspects, or rather I would suggest 3. One is the family life cycle, because that creates sociological interaction among people. The second frame is typically cultural based itself. And the third one is the status based system, which is again part of the social cultural framework. Now here I will discuss and show you a model on the family life cycle area, just to help you understand the basic concept. Now, if you look at the screen, you will find that there is a group which is middle-aged, divorced people without children. Now, obviously, that middle-aged group will have a total different framework than a group which has middle-aged, but they are married, but they do not have children. Now, understandably, these 2 frames are totally different from one to the other. Similarly, we will find that there are young people who are divorced. Now, they have got totally different lifestyles, and therefore they will be looking at different products from a different angle. For example, we can also see that there are young single people who are not married. They are most probably going to the jobs for the first time. They are still not getting used to the lifestyle that they have been able to choose for themselves. They are trying to figure out how they are starting their jobs. They are just entering the job market, so on and so forth. Then we find that there are going to be young couples who are just married, living two, no children at this point. Maybe one is working, one is staying at home, or maybe both are working, which is the trend that are coming in. And again, we will find that these have got different aspects. Now, then we will see that there are young couple with a child, maybe one child, very young. The mother is staying home. The father is going for a job while they were initially both working. Now only one is working. The other person has given up her job for the sake of the child. Now you can imagine the changing frameworks in all of these three, if I don't go into any major detail. But even looking at all these three, we can see that there is substantial difference among the way they live. Mother who has no child is earning, so the family income is much higher. Then when the child arrives, mother has to leave the job. The income is now only with the father, therefore the income is going to go down, but the requirements are going up in terms of now the child requires milk, it requires various other products for the child as it is. Now, then we see the next group is when the young couple now has 2 or 3 children and they are school going. Again, you see immediate shifts. Now, the mother can go to the school to her job, but may not be able to take a 9-to-5 job. So she might be working in a temporary kind of arrangement. Plus, the children are going to school, so their requirements are going to shift from normal nappies that they had and milk, powdered milk that they were using, bottled milk, and so on and so forth, now towards uniforms. The school-going uniform, the kids are going to have books to be bought, they would have sports to be taken care of, but at the same time, the family is going into a higher income level, or the status is changing. The initial stage when the young person had just joined the job market, he might have got a motorcycle, but now over 4 or 5 years or 6 years, he seems to be now having a small car. So we know that as his income is growing, his expenses are also increasing. Now let's look at a family which is now the father or the family members, the father and the mother, both are now at senior positions. Their children have finished their education, or most probably they are at the end of their educational systems, but they are at marriageable stage. So the family will be now thinking about putting all the money, saving the money for the purposes of getting the children married off. That family would be restricting their expenditures in a number of ways. Even if the couple, the senior couple, the family, the parents want to take a trip out, they will still try and not do that because they still have married children in their home. But once the children have been married, now the income levels will really jump for this family or this couple because they will be now employed at senior positions. They have children who are already working, married off, so they can then start thinking about themselves. So if you look at it, all along the life cycle, the family life cycle, the needs have been changing. It is now the job of the marketer to actually find out which particular segment of the market would he be able to best satisfy in his own framework, the way the product will be delivered, the way or the kind of product it will be, the attributes that the product will have. Now we come into the concept of cultures. Now again, culture is a long-lasting value system that is adopted by a group of people. So cultural values are long-lasting. Now it is also suggested that various cultures normally tend to behave in the similar manner. There are certain frameworks, for example, that may not be acceptable in certain cultures. And we have very good examples about it. For example, if I was to suggest that a marketer is going out on a marketing job in the international market and he has to visit a number of countries, then it becomes very, very critical to understand that which culture in the world would allow certain things or will not allow certain things. And that same frame is very helpful in also trying to figure out the various cultural segments and what products can be satisfied. Just to take you into an example to show what could not be or what should not be given as a gift, we understand that if we were to go to India, for example, a cow leather's briefcase or maybe a wallet may not be the right kind of gift, which means that that should be avoided. So it is the same way in the cultural frames that we find that certain cultures will not like to have certain products. For example, the clock, the time clock, is not a gift that normally is given in the Eastern civilizations, which means Japan and China. They consider it as a bad omen. Now, all these things have very significant impact on the kind of product or the way you approach the market. Not only there are cultures, but we must also recognize that within the cultures, there are subcultures. Take the example of Pakistan. For example, we have in the Punjab area, we have the northern Punjab and the southern Punjab. Then in the Sindh area, we have the northern part of the Sindh and the southern part of the Sindh. Same is the case with the northern parts of Pakistan, where we find different cultural frames around it. And each culture needs to be studied in a very close manner so that the marketer does not make a mistake in terms of providing something that is considered to be taboo there. These frameworks are just part of a larger analysis that we keep doing. Now, I will be coming at the end of this lecture to the social class or the social status of method of segmentation. Now, we recognize this, that every society or every group of people normally tend to have social classes. Social classes are defined by certain typical behaviors. Now, without going into major details of it, we should be able to see that, let's take the logic of status. Now, in organizations, there are chief executives. Now, if you look at more or less the chief executives of various companies, we should be able to see that their behaviors, their requirements of products are more or less similar. And that is why we find the Toyota Corolla targeted at a particular group and a Honda car, City or Civic targeted towards a different group of status class people. Consider Pajero. Now, Pajero has been a status symbol in Pakistan for a long time. The reason basically has been that certain group of social class started using that product and it became a symbol of that particular class. In the same way, we find that various status people or groups of people have different dress codes. In this framework, we can see that lawyers, when they go to their offices, dress up in a different manner, while doctors most probably dress up in a different framework, while bankers and businessmen or marketers even dress up in totally different frameworks. Now, the point that is being made again here is that since status draws people together, there is more interaction amongst these status group or social class. Therefore, they tend to start learning behaviors, the requirements, the needs, the wants of a similar group. And if you recall that most of the time, particularly when you have, let's say, in the airline, you find that there is a business class. Now, why would you have a business class, except the idea is that the business class would have separate needs from people who sit in the economy class, and since business class people belong to a particular class within the social class framework, so they have different needs, their requirements are different, they read different material, they discuss it differently, they most probably require some method where laptops can be used, and so on and so forth. And then we find that we have the first class. Now, each aspect that we have discussed up till now suggests that whether it is status or whether it is social class, their behaviors typically differ from one another. Take another example. We find who plays golf more. Now, golf is more or less played by business people, particularly in the Western world, and it is becoming typically what is happening in Pakistan also, that the golf is normally played by people who are either in the business or from the armed forces. People, most probably the landlords, may not indulge in this kind of activity. Same is the case with the kind of cars that they buy, the kind of houses they have, the kind of location for their houses that we have. And we can see that typically in Pakistan, at least, we find that the army has its own sector where they build their own homes and they try and live within their community, because it is easy to be able to interact with these people. Now, so we have covered the aspects of the family life cycle. We have also taken care of the area of the culture and the subcultures and the social class and the status class. One significant but maybe a little bit of a controversial area is based on religion. So as a marketer, even though we should not be able to take sides on the issue of what is good and what is bad, but we should recognize that we must be very careful in terms of religion itself. Various religions around the world have certain things which can be accepted or which will not be accepted. For even, let's say, for example, even a person who is American or a European going to Saudi Arabia may not be allowed to go into certain areas of Saudi Arabia itself, may not be allowed to bring certain kind of products, may not be allowed to wear certain kind of dresses, because that is typically what we have in terms of the religious aspect. Same is true with Pakistan, and so on and so forth. Around the world, the same is quite true. So as marketers, we not only try and segment the markets where we see how things can fit in, or we can also discover the gaps. What it also helps us do is to make sure that we do not make mistakes. We avoid those costly mistakes. For example, segmentation will definitely help you in trying to determine the media that you will use to reach a particular segment of the market. It's more logical that if you want to target children, then you will be using the cartoon programs or the programs which are targeted at the children to put your advertisements there. Whereas if you are looking at a group of people who are very serious about life in terms of being government officers or so and so forth, you will be targeting that kind of a program which they want to watch or they normally watch. Same is the case with housewives. Now, not only that, not only the media, but also the timing when the media is watched. For example, Nielsen rating. The company AC Nielsen has its own rating system where they rate all the media's television programs and so on and so forth in such a way that they actually are capable of specifying that a particular program is watched by what kind of a group of people. And for your information, they're doing the same thing in Pakistan. There is a company, for example, in Pakistan, which has got close to about 5 or 50,000 households on the list where they have put specific equipment in their homes, particularly linked with the television, and that is based on the agreement between the household and the company, and the company records every time the television comes on. They record the timing, they record even what program is being watched and for how long it's watched, and so on and so forth. The idea behind this is that it provides a wealth of information for the marketer to use it. Obviously, there is a cost behind this kind of information, but to make it more sensible, to make it more targeted when you are particularly going to start a promotional campaign which will cost you millions of rupees, you need to be very specific as to which program you should target yourself on, and which program is watched by which segment. Keeping these points in mind, we are now coming to the conclusion of this part of the lecture. I have not completed the area of segmentation. We will take up segmentation in what I call in the next session, and I will cover the more difficult aspects of segmentation in terms of the psychographic analysis, the lifestyles, the psychological analysis in terms of motivation, and so on and so forth. And we will then get a clear picture of the amount of information that a marketer can have at his disposal to be able to make the right choice of the targeted segment, plus should be able to develop specific products to satisfy the wants of that segment in the way the price has to be put into position, where should it be delivered, what kind of promotional or information campaign should be used to make the customer aware of these facilities that he is going to provide. Now, keeping these in mind, today's lecture I'll finish and hope to see you again in the next lecture. Thank you very much.